The sun has left and forgotten.
Your stories don't define you, but how you tell them will. Hi, I'm Sarah Elkins, your host and chief story maker at Elkins Consulting. Whether you're sharing personal stories or business stories, the stories you share say a lot about who you are. And when you're intentional about those stories, you can unlock the stories of the people in front of you, creating a much deeper and stronger connection. Listeners, remember, if you are getting ready for a job interview, there's a course now on Udemy, Job Interview Storytelling, and you can find the link at my website, elkinsconsulting.com. It will make you feel so much more confident and prepared for your next series of interviews. Well, thanks to a fabulous introduction by my friend Nettie Owens, who has introduced me to quite a few very intelligent, insightful, and thoughtful professionals. She made this introduction to my new friend, Christopher Fillipiak. And I invited him to be on the podcast because during one of our conversations, we talked about community. And if you've heard any of my episodes of this podcast, you've probably heard at least one or two comments almost every episode about community and how meaningful that is when you're trying to change something in your life or build something in your life. So, Christopher, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, for sure, Sarah. It's really good to be here, and I'm glad Nettie connected us together.
She is a fabulous connector, isn't she?
She is, no doubt. She knows something about community as well.
She really does. We could next time, maybe we'll bring in a couple of other people and do a whole panel discussion on it and how we find it, because I think it's really different for different people, how they choose and find community. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people aren't intentional enough about choosing community, and they end up in positions where they're not being their best person because they're influenced by the people in their community in a negative way. But we can get into that later. Let's start with positive. I would love to ask you to share something about yourself that most people might not know about you. And this is maybe something from your childhood or something that a hobby you took up that isn't on your profile on LinkedIn. It's not in your bio. It's not in your resume. The idea being, we often anchor people in time based on our single experience with them. And by sharing something outside of your work and your daily activities and your thoughts about community, our listeners will have a better, more complex view of who you are as a person.
It's a really interesting question, Sarah. And I think there's lots of people I've been on this planet 40 plus years at this point, right? So I've had a lot of experiences and I've done a lot of things. I've had many different careers, many different relationships, I've had many different roles. And I think you make an excellent point where you're like, look, like it's hard to understand who that person is completely. So let me see, something people wouldn't know about me. I'd rather share something like from right now than from the
Sure.
past.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think would be better. So I'll just go, I don't know. The most obvious is like I have I have four children, right? And they're with me right now, and we're in the moment going through Hurricane Helene. Like Hurricane Helene came through Asheville just about 2 weeks ago now. And so it's been really, really interesting to see that and how I think about being a father and being a dad, right? And what that actually means to me to be a father and be a leader in my family. And I think the most vulnerable thing I can share about that, and this is something, that's not on my LinkedIn profile, is there's a gap between where I am as a father and who I want to be as a
Oh.
father or as a dad, right? And
Uh-huh.
I think that's a very common American thing to have a gap or have an ideal that's beyond where we are currently. But it's something I spend a lot of time thinking about, like how I show up for my children. And I think the other thing, you know, and I'm actually glad I'm talking about this more than like, something in my past that may be, something that I did that someone doesn't know, is I really, really care about children. Like I have, not just mine, but really educating and helping children step out of all of the trauma and abuse that they endure, like as they're growing up. And I don't know how that doesn't express in my professional work,
Right.
Sarah, like right now. I don't, outside of like parenting my own children, I don't know how that's gonna evolve for me, but
Mhm.
I see that coming more into the work that I do. Um, and how we think about, since we're talking about community, what is community and friendship and love and creative expression and education and actually look like for children? Because I think in a lot of ways, and this is where the gap is for myself, I'm not serving my children at the level that I want to, or I think that is possible for them. And I think children in general get pretty underserved. So
Oh,
yeah,
that's such a sad thing to think about. And
yeah,
I would say that there are definitely places where it's worse
yeah.
than, I would say where I am in this small town, Helena, Montana, that there's a population of children that are significantly underserved.
Hmm.
And at the same time, I think about that a lot too, about how community impacts children. And I mentioned in the beginning about being intentional about community. I have to admit, I wasn't consciously intentional about creating community when our boys were little. And our two boys are now 23 and almost 26. They were
Hmm.
both raised here in Helena in the same house, went to the same elementary school. I moved around. I went to 4 different elementary schools. My husband went to many, many different schools because he's the son of a Navy sailor
Hmm.
who ended up retiring as an admiral. So they were all over the world. And what I think about now is that I can look back and say, oh, thank goodness we created the community that we have.
Hmm.
So, for instance, when we moved into town, we lived on the east side of town where there weren't even any sidewalks and we didn't know our neighbors. And the only reason I met one of our neighbors is because I locked the keys in the garage, which is separate from the house we were renting, and had to call my landlord. And I didn't have a phone back then. That would have been in 1999 or
Hmm.
early 2000. And I had to cross the street and ask to borrow somebody's phone to call my landlord to let me back in. And I met this woman who had 2 boys, um, a little bit older than our baby, who was probably 10 months old at the time. Then we moved across town, and now we live in the old part of town. We live in a house built around 1890. Most of the houses around us are turn of the 20th century homes. And what changed was partly that the boys went to school right across the street from our house. That's their elementary school.
Hmm.
And so we would walk across the street and I would meet the parents of all of their classmates. And we created community at the playground, watching our
Hmm.
kids get ready for school and helping each other. And I would go over once a week to be a parent helper in the classroom. So I knew all the kids my boys were growing up with.
Hmm.
It's a small town. Most people could
Hmm.
walk to school.
Hmm.
And then I got involved with the artist community and we got involved with the musical community of our town. And then I worked at the library. And so
Hmm.
we got involved with the library and the readers community in town. And my younger son got really involved with the young readers, the teenage group that formed at the library with the young adult librarian being the lead. So we created this community of adults that our kids could go to so that I wouldn't have to have that big gap.
Mhm.
I could provide what I could provide and still know that they were going to be served by the community. So I'm curious, first of all, the ages of your children, and second, what does that look like for you in terms of intention? Does that change anything when you hear my story? Anyway, that's where my brain is going.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. So my kids are 12, 9, 8, and 4 right now. And that's been a learning experience as well, especially, being an entrepreneur and a business owner, as there's a level of responsibility that you have as a parent and a business owner. And so that's informed a lot of the decisions that I make in my business or the work that I do as well. And I think hearing your story, it it's beautiful. Like it's super cool you got to live across the street from the school, right? And in a community where people came together to want to have that level of community and that support. And I don't know if that's for, I think it's about, I don't know, that's my thought on the way you raised your children and the opportunity you created for yourself. I think it's a lot of it. I have a friend that I went to college with. His name is Mike, and he does something that he calls soul school with his kids, which is some form of like homeschooling combined with world travel, and he's a business owner as well.
Awesome.
I think for my children, some type of I don't know. What almost, I don't even know what it looks like, Sarah, but what I envision in my head is some type of community village of business owner entrepreneurs who are like teaching their kids more of a vocational curriculum more than an academic curriculum, right? And kind of being more in the world around so many of the topics that we struggle with as humans, whether it's like money or abuse or sex or inequality or politics or even, I said money, but like how like around business, I think there's this really rich human curriculum that's available to us
Mhm.
or like, that the current way and the place the place that our educational system was created from. And, there's no doubt you know, that system provides an amazing system or amazing service to the community as well, and there's room as there is with any system, right? Or any human room for growth and improvement,
For
right?
sure.
Um, I just know that for me, I want something different for my family. And I think that's, hearing your story and then, um, seeing what some other families and what other entrepreneurs and business owners are doing. I think you can create a really rich human curriculum for 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 my children and for myself. And I think that's ultimately like what's so beautiful right now. You're in Montana, I'm in North Carolina, like we're connected, right? And that's different than it was in 1999, right?
Right,
And
right. I
certainly in the
couldn't have,
80s, right?
right.
A very different level of being able to find the people who you resonate with. And I think so much of it is about actually getting clear and creating the life that you actually really want, whatever that actually looks like, and being willing to be honest about that and teaching your children that they can actually create the life that they want as
Mhm.
as well. So
So
I don't
one
know
of
if that answer, I don't know if that answers your
well,
question.
one of the things we talked about in our first conversation was the importance of face-to-face
Mm-hmm.
in terms of community. Now, I have connected with people all over the world that I've never met face-to-face, but
Mm-hmm.
consider to be friends. So when I got involved in LinkedIn many years ago, probably 2014, 2015, I connected with this small group of professionals that over the last 10 years have moved into incredible different places in their lives. That's a long time, right? And many of us went from a standard, W-2 job to being self-employed. Some have gone back to jobs. Some people have become best-selling authors in this group. One guy is a material scientist in Belgrade, Serbia.
Mm-hmm.
And I consider him a dear friend. Never met him in face to face. However, in late 2016, after connecting so deeply with a particular group on LinkedIn, doing all kinds of different things, it's not like we were all in the same industry or anything. I thought about what it would be like to meet everybody face to face. I thought, if I'm learning this much from these people just by interacting with them online, maybe picking up the phone once in a while, imagine the exponential learning that would come from meeting in person. And I put it out there to this group of about 20 people and said, what do you think? Would you fly across the country or from Europe to come meet face to face? Would you do that? It can't be just a meetup. Nobody would do that. Nobody would spend that kind of money just for a meetup. But what if we put together kind of an agenda, a curriculum, so that each of us that has expertise in different areas could have these discussions and learn from each other? They all said yes.
Mm-hmm.
And we met face to face. There were 23 of us in February 2017 at the Ritz-Carlton in downtown Atlanta, Georgia. Most, I would say, only 2 or 3 of us had ever met face to face. And when we all arrived that Wednesday night for the Thursday, Friday event, it was like a reunion of friends. Immediately, we were hugging and so excited to see each other. And we were together nonstop from that night until Friday afternoon.
Mm,
And nobody wanted it to end.
yeah.
And it was different meeting face to face. And that's what I wanted to make sure our children had,
Mm-hmm.
because I knew that they were going to be the people who knew people from around the world because they have that accessibility.
Yeah.
But we need hugs
Mm-hmm.
desperately.
Yeah.
I think now more than ever.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a bedtime storybook. It's called Conscious Bedtime Stories. And one of the stories, it's a series of books. It's beautiful. Like if you have young children, it's a beautiful series. And one's called The Hug That Got Stuck. And it talks about this idea of um how many hugs you need a day. This isn't like the stories. There's a story section, but then there's like this connection moment. It talks about how many hugs you need per day. And they say you need 8 hugs a day just for maintenance, and you need 12 for growth. So we definitely need hugs. Um, I'm curious, I love that story. And this is, I'm curious, Sarah, why do you only see each other once a year? Like, why haven't you moved in together? Right? Like, if you all love each other so much, why haven't you created a village from those 24 people?
So
Right?
there are very few of us that aren't married and with children.
Yeah.
And as you can imagine, if we connected, you came to NLV that's coming up in Austin in
Yeah.
2025. If you showed up there and we all fell in love as a group,
Yeah.
would you pick up your whole family and move to Montana?
Maybe. I mean, yeah.
And
I mean, if
and your
that's so
wife and
important,
her mother would be okay with that, and you would just leave
maybe. And then you
everything
created like
behind.
a little bit, like if it was so sweet, it was so important to you, right? And those relationships were so
Yeah.
important.
Well, I think
That's because we have so much flexibility, and that's I think a lot about I think in a way, I think it depends, you'd have to balance what you have, like I live here in Asheville with 4 kids and my wife, and it's amazing, right?
Yeah.
But I also know that I don't have, like, I go dancing most Sundays, right? And we have a beautiful dance community here, right? And so 100 people in 2 dance waves come together and they create magic together for an hour and a half, true times on Sunday morning. It's incredible. And it's very interesting to me how profound everyone speaks about that experience, right? Once a week, and how profound your experience is and how much love and community is created once a year at this event, right?
Mhm.
And then we go back to our regular lives, which is okay. There's like no judgment there, but it's like, what if you reverse that? What if you lived in that community more of your life and created more? How amazing could it be if you spent more time with
Mhm.
that group of people? And I'm not saying that's right for everybody, but it makes me think a lot about what community actually is, and this idea of actually, is there the potential to go back to this idea of like being in village, right?
Right.
With
Like a tribal
people,
system.
like
Well,
a
kibbutz. It
yeah,
exists in Israel. The kibbutzim, that's exactly what it is.
but with people who you want to be, whatever that looks like. So like,
Well, they make choices for sure about
yeah,
who's going to be there, and it's kind of a self-selected group,
yeah.
right?
So, and it's like you need like here in like parents and entrepreneurs, like we all need each other. Like we need help. You need help. You
Mhm.
need community, right?
Right.
And I think humans are stronger with community. And one of the things that's been resonating with me, or that has come into my awareness this last year or so, is just how damn lonely everybody is. Like
Right.
loneliness is an epidemic right now,
Hmm.
and I think it's the way. I think a lot of it just has to do with the way that our environment is set up currently and the way that we live. And I don't have any answers.
Right.
I'm on my own journey around that, but I think that my
Yeah.
question is like, why don't you spend more time? Like, why
Right.
hasn't that group come together to build a village?
Well, and I think there are a couple of different things at play here. One is we choose each other once a year,
Hmm.
and we are still in touch. Like just this morning, I met with 2 of them and we did co-working together. Every
Hmm.
Monday, a few of us get together and we just do work sprints together. We're just
Yeah.
working together via Zoom. I turn on soft music. We stop every 20 or 25 minutes and visit, and then go back to our work. And so we continue to be in community all year long. And some of us actually meet face to face beyond that.
Mhm.
I've had 2 people just this year come and visit me from wherever they live, just to see
Yeah.
Montana, just to stay with me, and be fed at my dining room table, because we talk a lot
Uh-huh.
about how I love to feed people. Go hiking with me on the mountain behind my house. They come to visit to experience that community. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is that we have to choose our in-person community. Most people just stay where they are because it's convenient. So I had this conversation with my aunt, my dad's sister. She said when she was she and her husband had just retired. They were thinking about moving from Virginia to Arizona. And I said, why Arizona? She said, well, we're not like you and Bob. You chose where you wanted to live. You made that decision and you moved from Washington, D.C. to Montana. That was a choice you made. She said, we never intentionally made a choice about where to live. Uncle Jeff got a job here. We got a house nearby. We had 2 kids and we stayed there. And yes, they built community to a certain extent, but it wasn't intentional. And it definitely wasn't a community that thrives the way that you're describing in your dance community, or that thrives the way I'm describing in my no longer virtual community.
Mhm.
So I think a lot of it is choosing. So as far as the loneliness, we live in a single family home. So that alone could separate us, right? We could make that
Mhm.
choice to say, well, we're insulated. We're going to just stay in our home. But we live across the street and from the school. And so many times there were children who didn't have enough to eat. And my kids would bring them home after school to eat so that they would have one good meal.
Mhm.
And I would bring big crock pots full of soup or stew to the teacher's lounge because I lived across the street. I could do that. I could support them in that way and support that community. We chose to interact with our neighbors. We had them over for Halloween. They invited us over for whatever, a backyard barbecue. One of the things that I've been learning a lot about through my friend Paul Howery is that there's a difference between um, belonging and fitting in,
Mhm.
right? And one of the things that I think is so critical when it comes to building your own community is making sure that you are contributing and that you allow others to contribute. So I guess what I'm saying is there is the face-to-face community that you build, that you choose, if you're intentional about it, that you contribute to, that you bring people in, and that they then choose to belong in that community. And then there's a community online that can work in a really similar way.
Mhm.
And meeting face to face once a year is enough because we continue conversations throughout the year through Zoom and on the phone. I've even taken them for walks with me on FaceTime on the mountain behind my
Sure.
house. So does that, I don't know, does that trigger any thoughts for you?
Mm, no, I think it's, it's kind of like it's okay to have multiple communities.
Of
I would say it
course.
like that,
Yeah,
right?
for
You
sure.
know? And I think it's about creating, I think there's an invitation and I think there's an opportunity for all of us to look at the difference between the communities of convenience versus the communities that we really desire, right? And taking time
Right.
to actually be intentional and conscious about creating the communities that we desire and having the courage and doing the work to actually create that for ourselves, whether that's in person or online,
Online.
right?
Right.
And I think that can be, there's people that we're having that conversation because we're each doing that in our own way, right?
Right.
And I think that value of community, we recognize that as being important for ourselves personally, but also for our businesses and the work that we do. So that's what that it makes me think. It just makes me think about um it makes me recognize what a it helps me continue to lean in to creating the communities that I want.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, absolutely. And maybe fill in that gap a little bit by modeling that for your children.
For sure. So,
I
yeah.
love that. So at one point you mentioned that you would love for your work to also embody that love for children and the motivation to create safe, loving places for children in
Yeah.
general. So without telling me what you do, can you
Mhm.
tell me a story about a recent experience in your work that felt really satisfying? So what I'm asking you to do is tell me what you do without telling me what you do by telling a story about it.
So I coach a lot of people in my business. Okay. And I've been in mindset work since my mom gave me chicken soup for the soul when I was like 10 years old in the 80s. Okay. Just
I
like
love
there's
it.
like I've always like somehow always been aware. But what I've learned from that, and as from my own experience and from coaching the hundreds of clients and working with the business owners and CEOs that I work with, is there's all of us have pain inside of us. We all have pain, we all have fear, we all have wounds. Like a lot of people are asleep, right? And all that stuff starts in childhood. All those belief systems get programmed when we're very, very little, age 0 to 7. So when that stuff gets programmed, and a lot of people don't wake up from that. It doesn't mean they can't have good lives. There's no judgment on what you want to do or where your journey takes you. But I think the coolest part about my work is helping people wake up to their true desires, to the truth of who they really are, and giving them permission and showing them a really easy path to have what they want and be who they are, right? And when you can unlock that for someone, you know, I talk to my clients almost every day, and they're just like, holy shit, I can't believe like what's happening in my life because of the things you've helped me with and the awareness you've created, right? And the amount of money, since I work with, I help businesses add revenue to their business. It's like the consulting side of my business, but my clients, are having incredible growth and adding tremendous amounts of money to their business and to their lives. And more important than that, like that's cool. Like that's something we can all figure out. There's a very like precise skill set, like a mathematical formula to that.
Uh-huh.
Like it's kind of like solved. But what makes it difficult is what's going on inside of ourselves, what's going on in here and in here. Right. And when you shift that, you really see people create amazing results. Um, but I think it'd be really cool if we worked on that when we were 5 years old or 3 or 7 or 10 instead of when we're
Uh-huh.
50,
Right. Right.
right?
Well, we could reduce so much of the traumatic experience that people have if they could stop the
For sure.
cycle as a child, because
Absolutely.
then they wouldn't be passing it along to their community
Then,
and eventually their
yeah.
children or their siblings.
And I don't want to take away like everyone's journey is happening for a reason, and it's part of what we're here to do is to walk
Mhm.
our own journey. And as traumatic as childhood can be, like there's both benefits and drawbacks to those,
Those
every circumstance,
experiences,
those
right?
experiences, right? There's,
For
you
sure.
know, but I do think there's a level of awareness that could be created and a shift in the way we teach and the way we educate and the things that we prioritize as parents, as communities, when it comes to what we're teaching what we're modeling and teaching
Mhm.
our children, right? So that I think that's something about that's gonna come in the future for me. So
Well, I'd like to point
and
out that every client that you guide toward this awakening, toward this self-awareness, every single one creates a ripple effect
mm,
because they have children or they will have children or they have children in their lives, nieces, nephews. They have influence with children somewhere in their lives.
mhm.
And so what you're doing is already making an impact because it doesn't just stop with one person. When somebody awakens like that, you've modeled it for them, they're modeling it for others.
Yeah.
And it could be their employees that suddenly realize, oh my gosh, if he can do it, I can do it. If
Mhm.
if they see that self-awareness, the choice to look in the mirror and own those things that you weren't so excited about and own the things that you're getting in your own way.
Mhm.
When you make that choice, other people suddenly feel like they can too and not be so afraid of it. So just putting
Yeah.
that out there, you're already having that influence. I can imagine though how that could be taken even further.
Yeah.
I'll be really curious to watch that journey.
Thank you. Yeah, it's gonna happen.
It will. Well, one of the things I think about a lot, because I love to cook and I love to nurture and feed people, I
Yeah.
think about the fact that when children feel cared for through eating healthy foods, through sitting at a table and noticing them and listening to them, we can change the world that way.
For
We can
sure.
get them out of a dangerous or non-nourishing environment, even for an hour a day. It can be the difference between continuing the cycle and stopping the cycle.
Yeah, for sure. It's like, what's coming up is like, even something as some of the basic things like nourishing food, like you're talking about, there's so much misinformation about food
Mm-hmm.
and has been for my entire life. Like, it's, just having what actually nourishes us as humans, um, the way we sleep, how much
Mm-hmm.
sunshine we get, how many hugs we get, right?
Yeah.
Like how we build friendship, the things that how we think, how we feel, right? All
Mm-hmm.
those things really, I mean, how we teach children about sex or not sex, right? How we teach people about money, right? How we teach children about changing and growing, like those
Right.
very core human experiences, right? Are um teach people about ourselves, like what it means to be human, right? And what a
Mm-hmm.
human actually is, right? And how we're connected or part of all of life. Like those are things that I think are missing. I would say that they were certainly missing for me in the way, not that I had a bad childhood, right? And all our parents do the best they can at their
Of
level of
course.
awareness, right?
Right.
But I felt like even at the time, I'm like, this is okay, but man, I see such a gap here.
Right.
Right? Like
I remember I felt the same way, especially when because we went to synagogue, we were a pretty ritualistic practicing Jewish family. And so we would go to
Mhm.
synagogue every Saturday for the Sabbath and every Friday
Yeah,
night. And I remember sitting in services one time and thinking, this is not spiritual for me.
yeah,
And I could see that for other people it was. But I
yeah,
remember being 15 and thinking, this is not where I find my spirituality.
yeah.
So I hear you. Well, Christopher, this has been such a treat. I love hearing your perspective about what community can be.
Mm,
And it just definitely got me thinking about how to embrace it in different ways, making sure that it's addressing that loneliness, however you choose to be in community. So thank
yeah.
you for bringing those thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, we knew like we connected right away, which was cool. Like we barely know each other, but I think there's some shared connection there. And I think I would just, you know, certainly this is something that I'm doing in my own life and I would share as we wrap up here, something for the listeners to think about is how can you take those moments in your life that are special or central where you're tapped in, right? And aligned and in the truth of who you are. And how can you bring more of those moments in to the majority of your life instead of the small part of your life, right?
Right.
And I think
Yeah.
if we do that more and more, even if we shift that a little bit, because when you're tapped into community and you're really vibing with people, whether it's your Monday work session, right? Or your singing, or your once a year meeting with your group, right? How can you bring whatever that is, that community, that connection, that love, that truth into more of what you do on a daily basis? And I think if we do that and are conscious about that, that's gonna make a powerful impact on our community, ourselves, our children.
Absolutely. That's a great way to wrap this up. Thank you so much.
You're so
Christopher, thank
welcome.
you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
All
Was
right,
it-
listeners. Oh, yes, it was a pleasure. Okay, listeners, it's your turn now. How can you flip the equation so that you're spending more time in that place where you feel connected, even if that's outside by yourself, but particularly when you're in community, when you're not lonely? Think about how you can spend more time finding that community, choosing that community, embracing others, and bringing them into community so that they feel it too. We need to shift that equation so more of our time is spent there and less in loneliness. Thanks so much for listening.
That's the time you must keep on trying. Smile, what's the use of crying? You'll find that life is still worthwhile if you just smile.